Hey guys, it's the Disco Spider, and like many, I was not a fan of the first Cars movies. Sure, it's not the worst animated movie that Pixar could have released, but at the time Pixar was releasing so many amazing movies that this just could not compare, and was sadly their worst film. Which isn't so bad if you compare worse films from other animated studios like DreamWorks or Illumination. But it wasn't until 2011 when everything started to turn for the worse. Not only for the Cars franchise, but for Pixar as well when they released Cars 2. Cars 2, to this day, is hailed as the worst Pixar film ever. And after this disaster, Pixar started to release more duds like Brave, Monsters University, and The Good Dinosaur. But luckily, Pixar has made a few good ones in recent years, like Finding Dory, which I thought was pretty good, and Inside Out, which is my favorite Pixar film in the 2010 decade, more so than Toy Story 3. But after 11 years from the original Cars, and a year from another Pixar sequel, can Cars 3 actually pull a surprising fast one on us and actually be a good Pixar sequel and a good Cars movie? Or does Cars 3 make me want to be in a car accident myself? The film is about Lightning McQueen, thank goodness, who is starting to be an old alumni when a bunch of new racers start joining the scene and a ton of old racers start retiring. Intimidated by the new racer, Jackson Storm, Lightning must train to outrace Storm and go back to the glory days that he once had, with the help of a trainer named Cruz. My main problem with the first movie was the plot. The plot of the first Cars felt too unoriginal, too uncreative, like they took a Mad Libs of the hotshot who was humbled by this town plot and just added characters and names without adding much in it. In Cars 3, however, it may have been a little similar at first, having the plot of the alumni trying to get back into how he was in the good old days, but they crafted the story enough that it's actually pretty good. I love the tension and stakes in this film. Not only that Lightning McQueen almost dies in the first 20 minutes, but that McQueen has to gain a fast enough speed to beat Jackson Storm, or else he is forced to retire. And we really see McQueen give it his all in this movie and really makes us root for him. This movie also offers a lot of heart, mainly from McQueen and Doc and their strong bond that they had. This is my favorite part of this movie, seeing how much not only McQueen cared and looked up to Doc, but the other way around was just so touching. And also the ending of this movie was sweet and was a pretty good parallel to the first movie, but there is a few problems I had with that, but I'll get into that later. And speaking of the first movie, there were so many callbacks from the first film in this film, like so many characters from the first Cars movie having quick cameos in this one. Even if I'm not a fan of the first Cars movie, it was still nice to see some returning characters that we didn't see in this second movie. And come to think of it, this feels so much like an actual sequel to Cars than the actual Cars 2 movie, since a lot of the same themes and development from the first one was brought in this one and expanded on, while the second one felt more like a wacky straight-to-DVD movie that has no relations with the Cars franchise except for having the same characters. So at least I'll give Cars 3 that. But as for the negatives that this plot has, this movie's pacing felt too slow, and that it had too many scenes that felt like it went on for far too long. Like the demolition derby scene was pretty boring, and the whole ending felt too predictable. They even had a whole scene of, hey, maybe Cruz can race instead, and Lightning can be a mentor just like Doc, with them flashing back to parts of this movie, even though you could smell that twist from miles away. And they kept hammering hints to that twist that it just felt like everyone knew it was going to happen, and took a little away from the impact. And then lastly, my complaint with the story is that we didn't really need to have any other mentors in this film. I'll talk more about Stormy and his friends here than the character part, because this affects the story more. But although I am fine with them being in this movie, I didn't think they needed to be in this movie as much as they were. Stormy felt like he was going to be like another mentor to McQueen, but it should have stayed as McQueen being the top racer instead of bringing another character to top him. Maybe have him as like a little part of this movie, talk to McQueen and show him that being a mentor to a racer is far more rewarding than actually being a racer yourself. But instead we had him training McQueen and mentoring him, when they should have just kept it as Lightning and Cruz being each other's mentors, and that's it. Don't add any more because it kinda takes away from it all. Even if you're going to make McQueen have a mentor, make it Doc. Maybe have McQueen have his own one-sided conversation to Doc, like his spirit still lives inside him, instead of trying to replace Doc's character and take away from everything. But besides that, the plot, although having its flaws, was still compelling enough to be at least better than the other Cars movies. Then we have the animation. Of course, this is Pixar, the animation is gonna look good, and although it doesn't feel like they really stepped up their game. I mean, I get that it's hard to step up their game from Cars 2, although being a shitty movie, did have spectacular animation. In Cars 3, it felt like they didn't really offer us anything new animation-wise. We see typical cars and typical scenery. The only difference that some people may say is the animation of the demolition derby. But even with that, it's not enough to innovate the animation. But still, everything in this movie does look great, and the animation on the race does look spectacular, and, of course, the texture and rendering and the character movement on the cars look stunning. I just wish there was a little bit more to make the animation even better. Then we have the characters. First, we have our main character, Lightning McQueen. He is much better in this movie than he was in the first one. McQueen in the first one was such a jerk, and rewatching the first Cars movie before seeing this one, it was really hard to root for Lightning because he was such a jerk to everyone he met, thinking of himself as an amazing guy, and not in the comedic way, and his development was really predictable and so unoriginal. But in Cars 3, however, Lightning is actually a great guy, and we really get to root for him, seeing all the things that he goes through to try to become as great as he was in the first movie, like almost die in the first 20 minutes of this movie. And the bond that he and Doc had was just so lovable, and Doc himself kinda played a role in this movie, even though the actor who voiced him died ages ago. And I really love Lightning's development in this movie, how he practically becomes his mentor by being a mentor to someone similar was touching and really made the McQueen and Doc bond even more touching. And then we have Cruz, who I actually like. At first seeming like a boring and no personality character, but later on we get to know more about her backstory. And I like how she takes the place of Lightning in this movie, but being a completely different character than he was in the first movie. And the relationship McQueen and Cruz had was pretty sweet. Not as good as McQueen and Doc, but still enough to care enough for them at the end. And then we have Jackson Storm, who isn't really in this film, and we don't really get to see much from him. No backstory or anything. He's just there to antagonize McQueen, and that's it. But I will say that Armie Hammer's performance was good. Then we have Sterling, who isn't really in this movie as well. He plays the businessman who tries to be your friend, but really just wants your money. He may be one note and not really in this movie. I wish that he played more of a role in this film since I do like Nathan Fillion. Then lastly, we have the town of Radiator Springs, who are barely in this movie, including Mater. Yeah, they appear at the beginning of this movie, say a few lines, then appear at the end of the film, and then say a few more lines, and that's it. Which I like because the plot has nothing to do with them, since it's more about Lightning McQueen and his comeback story. And I really like how Mater is barely in this. Since he was the main character in the second one, I felt like they wanted to tone down his role because people were so sick of him in Cars 2, which I am thankful for. And then lastly, I want to talk about Cars 3 and the Cars franchise. This is definitely the best Cars movie, since it's the only one that I could actually call good. And that's because it took itself more seriously. Rewatching the other Cars movie, they felt like they were made just for kids, and that's it. Unlike all the other Pixar films that felt so ageless, that anyone can watch a Pixar film and love it, no matter how old you are. And this movie brings us back to that, where even if you're not a kid, you can still enjoy this movie as much or even more than an actual kid. And of course, the kids will go crazy for this movie. But this is what I like to see from Pixar, understanding its mistakes and trying to fix them, making Cars 3 not only a good sequel and a good movie in general, but a worthy sequel since it improves on the other movies. I never thought that I was going to say that for Cars 3. So, in the end, although Cars 3 isn't the greatest film, or even in my top 10 Pixar films, it is still way better than the first Cars, and definitely Cars 2, and generally a good movie overall by being a movie that offers more of a plot than funny and silly jokes. I would recommend Cars 3, since I thought that I was totally gonna hate this movie, but then finding out that it is in fact good. Now, if you really hate the first Cars, like you can't even watch it without getting mad, then of course I wouldn't recommend Cars 3, just skip it. But if you thought Cars 3 was meh, then there is a chance that you'll like this one. But what are your thoughts on Cars 3? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Leave in the comments. I'm curious to see if people actually like Cars 3. And also a little question of the day, what is the better Pixar sequel? Finding Dory or Cars 3? To me, they are in the same ranks, but me personally, I believe Cars 3 is the better film, because it takes the themes of the first movie and expands on it more than Finding Dory that just does the same thing from the first movie. But to me, Finding Dory is the more rewatchable film because Cars 3 does have a slower pace. And also, please like this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe for more cartoon-related reviews. But anyways, I'm the Disco Spider, and peace out.